guys, Reisshub back with another video, and in today's video I want to cover how to drop high eliminations in the solo cash cup. So if we look at the leaderboards and kind of go through the top 5 players, there's always one large elimination game, over 10 elims. So if we go Zalok, who came first, you can see he started with a 14 elimination game. If we look at Smudge, who was in second, he started with another 14 elimination victory royale. Olaf, he almost didn't really perform at the start, but then ended up having a 17 elimination game. Irizumi has a 13 elimination game, and Kand has a 12 elimination game. So over 10 eliminations for every single one of these players in that kind of top 5. So in the top of the leaderboard, you might not necessarily recognize a lot of the names, but that's because DreamHack Semis was going on at the same time as this. So in DreamHack Semis, they took the top 750 players away. So essentially, most of the top pros aren't in it, but as you notice, you might recognize some of them. For example, Irizumi, who is an OG. And what I want to go through is kind of what their kind of previous placements are. So like Zalok has around 5k earnings, Smudge is 13k, Olaf, no, the wrong one, is around 2k, but this is obviously after the cash cup as well. So this includes the cash cup money. Irizumi is at 35k, and then Kand is at 3.4. So these players aren't like just really bad overall. Most of them are not top level pros. Again, obviously the top level pros were mainly in DreamHack Semis instead, but they are very good players. And if we want to just take a kind of bit of comparison in terms of how good they are at fighting, if we look through into their Fortnite tracker and look at their actual KD for solo arena, I'd like to check their arena points just to see if there's any correlation, but fundamentally their KD is usually over, like this is actually funnily enough Zalok who has the lowest, who came first, so 2.68, Smudge has his on private unfortunately, Alfar was 3.35, Irizumi's 4.5, and Kand is 3.32. So roughly around a 3 to 4 KD in solo arena is what your kind of skill level for fighting is going to need to be up. And I know, like I already said, KD is not everything, but if you're just talking in purely fighting terms, some kind of statistic that you're going to need to drop high elimination games in tournament, I'd say that if you're not anywhere close to this level, you're potentially not that good enough to actually drop these high elim games. In terms of when these players all started to try and get the kind of worst lobbies possible, there wasn't really a trend at all. Zalok started 22 minutes late, whereas Smudge and Irizumi were both on time as soon as the tournament started, and then Olfar and Kand were both 5 minutes late after it started. So there was no real trend in terms of when these players started, it just really depended on their personal preference, it seemed like. So where do these players drop in order to get such high eliminations? Well, a lot of you may be thinking they're going to drop Salted Towers. This is where the most players usually drop in these first kind of games do the same thing. However, that wasn't what we saw in any of these 5 players at all. 3 of them actually dropped in Lazy Lake for their high elimination games. Kand actually ended up dropping their all game, so it was obviously his consistent spawn point. And then Alfar went Steamy Stacks for his, and Smudge went Misty Meadows, which was also his consistent drop spot as well, so he didn't change from there. So 3 of the 5 players ended up going to a kind of more contested POI to get their higher elimination game, but not anything crazy, not dropping with 15 other players into a POI. For a cash cup, this is just too risky in my personal opinion, and I would never recommend dropping Salted Towers unless it's a last game, you have a game to throw and you just need a couple eliminations. 3 of these players also then switched their drop spots away from this POI once they got into those higher elo lobbies. Zalok ended up dropping near the Shipwrecked Cove. Alfar ended up looking to get Camp Cod uncontested, but ended up actually dipping and going to Yellow Steel Bridge some games just because he wanted to land there with no other players. And Irizumi, rather than going Lazy Lake, ended up going to Weeping Woods. So most of these players had a drop spot in a big contested POI that they were really familiar with and able to get a ton of eliminations. Then once they managed to get this successfully, they switched to a less contested drop spot to play their games more consistently. So how were the eliminations spread throughout the game? Was it more early, mid, or late game? Well, for the majority of these players, they were all pretty even actually. They landed at this contested spot that we've already kind of mentioned, and then throughout the game they were just consistently keying, picking up eliminations as they went, and still in the end game playing extremely aggressive as well. So if you're looking back through your games and there's a big gap in where your eliminations are, potentially you get a lot off the early game, then there's not many in the mid game, but then you get tons more at the end game. You may need to think about your timings of mid game rotations or your path to try and find more players. Look at the map around your drop spot, see whoever is around you and rotating from these spots, and pick a path of where you're going to go to find the most people. If you're just wandering on the dead side looking for elims and there's no one there, that's not going to be very useful if you're trying to get a high elimination game. So you need to plan a path that will allow you to actually get the most eliminations possible. Rotating to the center of the map where the sand is will often actually allow you to get more eliminations, as this is where the most amount of congestion is from players rotating. So if you're looking to take a path, potentially go through the center of the map somewhere, but you must be wary because there's going to be a lot of players around and it's very easy to get third-partied. So let's start breaking down the actual fighting style and the actual mechanics required to fight these players and end these fights quickly. Well, let's firstly look at the weapons that they used. Majority of the players, being 4 of the 5, preferred having a purple tack or a gold tack as well. The only player who did not prefer to have the gold tack was actually Canned, who actually took a blue lever over a purple tack at a specific point. There's a lot of shotguns in the meta right now, so it is preference, but it's pretty clear that the purple and gold tactical shotguns are the best and the most powerful right now. Zalek had extremely clean piece control, to the point where it was actually kind of nuts. His movement was really good as he is on controller, so he had very good 360 movement. The majority of the eliminations that he got were just from placing walls in front of players, coning them, and just picking up easy eliminations with that good tactical shotgun, as we've already mentioned. The one thing I noticed from his gameplay is that he missed almost no edit, no builds were in the wrong place, but his mechanics weren't flashy. They were just very, very simple and very accurate, and this is something that we saw through all 5 of the players. Again, in second when we had Smudge, his mechanics were very, very similar. They were extremely clean with barely any missed edits, missed build pieces or anything like that. Very, very simple, just taking walls, placing cones in boxes and getting really good piece control on his opponents. If you aren't practicing your piece control at this point, I don't know what you're doing. It's basically the way to get the fastest eliminations possible. He also is very, very patient in his eliminations too. Not overcommitting by jumping into boxes or doing anything stupid like that, but he was just very patient. He kept his distance and he knew when their opponents were weak and which angles to take. You've got to be taking right hand peeks, and if you start running into old enemy builds, it's very easy for you to get eliminated this way, in particular if you haven't damaged your opponents yet. Olfar was a little bit of the other side of the spectrum, where he was extremely aggressive, often just ramp phasing into boxes from above or below. He actually often used this strategy from going underneath, where he'd spray in through the floor and take the cone at the same time, replace it, and then just be in the back of the box when the opponent was trying to leave, picking up easy eliminations this way. He also loved to ramp phase in from the front, so an extremely aggressive player. However, this definitely affected his consistency because it took 4 games for him to actually pop off and have this high elimination game. Irizumi is a player that we should know, a real big OG in this scene, and he is Russian, so his ping probably is around 50 to 60. I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. I couldn't really see any of his gameplay online. But because of this, you can kind of see in his gameplay that he's not just trying to take walls, he's not just getting himself really close to the box. A lot of his eliminations come from having really good AR tracking and hitting big sniper shots as well. He then, when he gets close to the box, isn't just standing on a wall pickaxing it, hoping that he's going to get it. He'll either ramp phase into the box, or just ensure that he takes multiple different angles, weakening different build pieces, and then taking these build pieces by surprise, which is something you have to do if you're on the higher ping. Try and catch your opponent out when he's not holding that wall. And our final player who came in 5th was Canned, and he had a very, very calculated approach to box fighting all these players. This guy has clearly played a lot of solos before and is very familiar with the current meta, because every time he goes to attack a wall, he almost fully boxes himself up to ensure that he doesn't get third-partied or sniped in the back. Most people complain about playing arena solos because they keep getting third-partied, they keep getting shot in the back, keep getting sniped when they're trying to take a wall, and you got to do exactly as Canned was doing here and just box up, make sure your angles are covered, and then start aggressing the wall that you're going to take. This was something he did consistently throughout his entire game. Very, very impressive to watch, a guy who almost never get third-partied, and because of this, he has a ton of heals to spare because he's not just getting shot in the back for a random 33 damage and have to pop a big pot or a chug splash. So overall, all of these guys' mechanics were extremely simple. They're not doing anything really interesting. There's just very nice piece control that's very calculated and thought out. Your mechanics don't need to be crazily complicated. They just need to be clean and consistent. The way the endgames are played out is pretty similar to a normal stat game. The way that they played these endgames out was mainly very aggressive. The biggest important factor when you're playing an endgame that doesn't have that many players alive in it, such as a low point lobby where you're going for high eliminations, is getting ahead of the zone. The majority of these players in their high elimination games opted to take high ground and do exactly that. Bounce pad ahead since they had so many from picking up so many eliminations, spray back with their AR, and pick up eliminations this way.
Most of the endgame elims don't come from box fighting, they just come from spraying with what you hopefully have a scar at this time with tons of ammo because you've already picked up a ton of eliminations. So just stay as far ahead as possible, keep high, spray back as much as possible, use those bouncers to ensure that you can stay ahead and win with tons of eliminations. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. Please use code Reisshub in the item shop, like and subscribe if you have not already. Peace!